Welcome to the Redefining Strength podcast. Everything you need to succeed on your health and fitness journey, even the stuff you don't want to hear. I want to talk about 10 reasons you aren't seeing results. Number one being you're more interested in being right than finding what's right. All of us can get ego in what we're doing, ego in our knowledge, but knowing isn't doing, and we can know a lot of things and still not see the tweaks that meet us where we're at. We're also basing a lot of what we think is right on what has worked for us in the past. But guess what? You aren't exactly the same person right now that you were even 2 seconds ago. I think my hair just moved, right? We're always evolving and changing. And the more we get set in our ways and think of, right and wrong as these very binary things over so much nuance and what could work a little bit better or what could work a little bit worse, the more we're setting ourselves up for failure. So I think a lot of times when we see that pushback of someone even suggesting something new, or we get that pushback when someone suggests something new, we think instantly to ourselves, no, I'm right. There's some defense of what we're doing over being like, how could I be wrong? Or how could this be better? It doesn't even have to be that you were wrong. It could just be better for you now. We're constantly doing new research that is proving new things too. So there's so much opportunity in the options. So when something's not working, instead of being like, well, these are all the things I'm doing right, say to yourself, how can I find a better way? Because if we get too caught up in being right over finding what's right, we're going to hold ourselves back. We're going to shut ourselves down to all the options and opportunities out there. Number two, you're not making the one change you need to make, and you're looking for any way to defend against it. I actually had a conversation with somebody in Messenger the other day where I was talking to her and I'm like, hey, you say you're willing to make all these different changes and you say nothing's working. What's one change you're fighting against or one area you're not really looking at your routine to assess? And we were talking about nutrition. She's like, well, I've done all these different diets. And ultimately I was like, well, what about your workouts? No, I'm not changing my workouts. I'm like, right there is the problem. The one thing we aren't willing to change is often the thing that needs a little adjustment. And maybe it's not in line with what our diet needs to be because of other hormonal factors. Maybe it's not in line with hormonal shifts. Maybe it's not in line with our age, our schedule, whatever else it is. And it wasn't that her workouts even weren't fabulous. Maybe it wasn't her workouts, but that unwillingness to look at them was going to hold her back, not only from changing potential issues with them, but that was going to pop up somewhere else. Because a lot of times when we defend against changes in specific areas more, we're putting up mental barriers against other changes. And so at some point, we're going to hold ourselves back from making a change that we really need. So the harder you're fighting a change, the more you have to look at the change and be like, this might be the one change I really need. Number three, you simply give up before results have had time to snowball. So often that's the case. We just need to keep going. Sucks. Because we sometimes don't feel like we can see results happening. But that's often also because we're only measuring progress in one way. So if you want that scale to change, you got to stop staring at the scale because it's not going to change by staring at it, by wanting it to change any faster. You have to celebrate the effort. You have to celebrate those habit changes. And so what you need to do is set ways to be successful in more ways by measuring progress in more than one way. I do believe that you can see progress towards your goals and know you're on the right track pretty quickly, whether it's changes in energy, changes in feeling fueled, changes in, bloat, changes in just feeling healthier. There's a lot of different ways we can know that we're on the right path towards something and that the changes are paying off. And a lot of times it's even owning, am I actually doing the habits consistently? As silly as it sounds, I always think back to when I was trying to make a habit change when I was younger. My mom put a calendar out and then gave me gold stars and I could put the stars on each day. Do that for yourself. If you're doing that consistently and you're doing that consistently for weeks on weeks on weeks, you're going to see progress. And it might not happen again in the way that you want first, but you're going to see progress. But you've got to assess that consistency because a lot of times you might notice there aren't gold stars on specific days. We've missed things. Not to mention, we're not recognizing all the time it took to get into our current situation. We're seeing where we are right now. We want changes tomorrow, but we don't see that actually a lot of these habits, the results we have now, they're a result of our past hustle, of our past habits, and they've built up over years, even the mindsets behind them that have kept parts of them ingrained. So sometimes it's not that you need something different. You just need to keep going and making little tweaks to keep yourself consistent and dedicated, but you need to keep going. Number four, you're trying to avoid the hard. There is no way around it. If you try and go back from the hard, it's basically like you're trapped in the circle in the fence and you go up and you hit the hard and then you go back. And then you go try and go a different way and you hit the hard and you come back. And you're still stuck in the same radius. You're just trying to get around it and you can't. You're going to hit the hard in some different form, but it's the same hard. It's that you're not willing to go that extra mile to push through that one pain. And I will tell you, we do this because we don't want to fail. But failures are the best learning experience. They are what truly creates our growth, truly creates our strength. If we don't suffer through them, as stinky as they might be, we're never going to build the strength to overcome. We're never going to build that mental resilience. We're never going to move forward towards our goals. The people who have succeeded the greatest have failed the most. We have to embrace that. So stop looking for a way around the hard. The sooner you embrace the hard, even, the sooner you can overcome that obstacle. And guess what? The next time you face a hard, it's not going to feel as hard because you're going to be more comfortable being uncomfortable and pushing into it, leaning into that discomfort. Number 5, you continue to try to focus on your limiting beliefs. Not try to, you do. You focus on those limiting beliefs. You tell yourself all the things you can't. You let that inner critic become louder and louder and louder. And if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. This is a great quote by Wayne Dyer. And I think it's important that we remember that our perspective shapes everything. We can see something as an opportunity or an obstacle. And it's very key that we recognize when we're repeating our limiting beliefs to ourselves because they're going to color how we approach everything. If you tell yourself you can't, that you're not good enough, smart enough, strong enough, you're not going to be enough for that obstacle. But if you tell yourself, hey, maybe I'm not even strong enough yet, but I'm going to find a way to get stronger. What's one thing I can do to improve? You're still testing that boundary. Yet is a very powerful word to give yourself the opportunity to see that you might be able to grow into this. But only by pushing into it, only by questioning those limiting beliefs can you drive forward to reach your goals. Number 6, so often we're not taking ownership. Guess what? If you succeed or fail, it is your fault. Yes, there are programs and plans that work better for us, that speak to us in ways that help us move forward. But ultimately, we have to take action. We have to determine what isn't working, and we have to move forward with things that are pushing us forward, and we have to let go of things that aren't working for us. We have to take ownership. It is our fault if something doesn't work, and we can't keep placing blame outside of ourselves. Because ultimately, if you really think about what's worked and what hasn't, the only common denominator in a lot of those things is you. Yes, there are other things like, it didn't work to cut out different foods or it didn't work to have hour-long workouts, but that's still about you and your priorities and your goals and the excuses you choose to make or the hard you choose to push through. And I see this as a very empowering thing. When I'm saying this isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying you can control the rain or that isn't going to have an impact. And I'm not saying we're not going to get down on ourselves or do the woe is me. Trust me, I do it far too frequently. But I do think it always is coming back to that ownership because that's what helps us get up and move forward the next day and take that next step and always keep picking ourselves back up when we have fallen. But the more you take ownership, the more you'll see your power in everything to make changes that move you forward. Number 7, you don't own your priorities and they become your excuses. Take a look at your excuses right now. A lot of these excuses probably are stemming from things you value, you prioritize in your life, or the priorities that you do have and then the impact they have on your lifestyle. But we need to own what is a priority for us, what is a non-negotiable, because otherwise it will pop up in our excuses and we're not planning for it. Because the reality is our life, a lot of times there are things we can't change, but we can own those things and then we can plan around them. So right now, if time is your excuse, why are you trying to force an hour-long workout? If time is your excuse, why aren't you steering into getting a few more meals prepped by somebody else or having a few restaurant meals in there? Why are you trying to force a specific meal prep? Why are you trying to force a specific workout routine? Own your priorities because it will help you overcome a lot of those excuses. And it's not always sexy, but taking it back to those 1% changes, those silly, simple habit swaps really adds up. Number 8, you aren't constantly reflecting. We learn more in the reflecting than in the doing a lot of times. But if you're not constantly stepping back to assess, what is my goal? Is it still important to me? How are my habits working? Does something need to shift? Especially as, the excuses pop up, the motivation starts to fade. Because what works for one season doesn't work for another. Like during the holidays, you're starting to be like, oh, this doesn't feel sustainable. The effort doesn't feel worth the outcome. Okay, well, own that. Step back and reflect. What's changed that now makes some of those habits that didn't even feel bad before not feel like they are worth it? Maybe you can change the habits and how you're implementing them because balance isn't just a set it and forget it finite thing. There is always the act of balancing. So the more we can really step back and look at everything and constantly reflect, the more we're going to see opportunity for growth and improvement. And I read this today and I can't remember where I read it, but it was a great example of giving more feedback during a time or right after a game where athletes had won. And I thought this was a very interesting thing because I do think we're more often going to reflect on failures try and brush past them as fast as possible, but we'll reflect on the failures, beat ourselves up over them. But then a lot of times when we've had that success, we then don't reflect on, hey, what's still something we could have improved? Not only what worked, but what's still something we can improve while we're in that positive mindset. And I think that's a very important sort of perspective to take, because it also reduces our resistance against feedback at times where maybe something didn't go as planned. We're more willing to reflect. So reflect on those winning experiences, not only to see the good, but to even see the opportunity for growth when you've done a lot right. That will help you see those 1% changes that really pay off. Number 9, you excuse 1% deviations. This is the most dangerous. Well, it's not that bad. I don't need to track this little bit of this. Or, oh, it's not bad. I just missed this one workout. Deviations are going to happen and you are going to miss that workout. You are not going to log that one thing. But the more we start to get into that habit of excusing them and justifying them to ourselves, the more we're going to become complacent, the more they're going to creep in. So saying, hey, I had to miss this workout for X, Y, and Z reason, but I'm doing this, and this as my game plan to move forward is different than letting yourself off the hook. And I think that's important that we really note that. There's letting yourself off the hook and there's giving yourself grace for being human and for life getting in the way. But the mindset and attitude we take with it is very different. Instead of excusing it and justifying it, it's saying, hey, this had to happen. Here's what I'm doing instead. And it's making sure that you have that clear game plan so that you do something to move yourself forward in terms of shifting your mindset, shifting your habits, shifting your routine, not just excusing it and letting those things slide, because we get complacent then. And that's where we don't see things snowball. And it can still even feel like we're working just as hard while we're seeing our results fade. And number 10, you're constantly searching for an aha moment instead of looking for reminders that connect dots and help you tweak. I bring this up because I know I am incredibly guilty of it. I do read new things and want some magic secret out there, even though I know there's not going to be one. And the more I've stopped searching for some big thing that's completely different than what I've done, because I've had people even start the Macro Hacks program or Metabolic Shred or different programs like that and be like, I was expecting some new magic ratio. Sorry, there probably isn't any. But if you were to read this and test it out, you might realize that the ratio is done in this order with this, framing all of a sudden is that aha moment that makes things click. And so the more I started reading and looking at programs and just listening to podcasts from that perspective of what's a phrasing to something that I haven't heard, or how are things being said, even the same description of the basics, said in a different way that maybe I can now connect a new dot for myself. Because hearing something that we've even heard 1,000 times before said at a new phase of life can all of a sudden make things click. And the more we look for those tweaks and everything, and the more we hear the nuance and even how something's being said, the more value we can get, where it can end up being the aha moment we need. It just didn't seem like that big a change to start. So these are 10 reasons why I feel like we often hold ourselves back, or how we hold ourselves back from seeing the results we want. And if you'll notice, none of them are macros really, or none of them are workout tips, because so much relates back to our mindset. Our mindset will shape all the other systems that we really need to enact. So if we can get our mindset framing the changes we need to make in the right way, we're going to see better results faster. Hope these really helped. I'd love to hear which one really resonated with you the most of all these different 10 so that you can really get working towards your goals today.